Okay, so previous screencasts we discussed how it was possible that we started to discriminate, and we saw that both males and females tend to prefer features in the opposite sex which signal underlying genetic quality. So things such as symmetry, but also people generally looking healthy, shiny hair, bright eyes, fairly clear skin, that kind of stuff are all important indicators of underlying genetic quality. So this is really a theory of aesthetics. We're asking, why do people find certain things beautiful and desirable? Well, the answer is, if we're talking about other humans, we find things that are desirable and beautiful in other humans that indicate to us the level of genetic quality that they have. But these are all similarities. Sex differences in mate choice is probably the most widely studied area in evolutionary psychology. And females and males are different. And basically the cost of sex to the individual is the thing which underlies the differences. Females, humans in particular, have a much greater cost of sex than males do. What does that mean? Well, again, we're thinking of ancestral times here. We're not considering a world in which there are abortions and contraceptions and things like this. So a female having sex with a male in ancestral times would have been likely to get pregnant. Like, males do not get pregnant, so whatever the likelihood of pregnancy is, it's certainly higher for females than for males. So there's greater risk from sex. That's just pregnancy, so we've got the pregnancy itself, we've got the birth, which is risky, dangerous, we've got nursing, breastfeeding, so on, and also having an infant. And we talked in the seminar that sometimes if the cost is too great, then following pregnancy, quite often certain species may well terminate the child's life or the offspring's life, and this happens in humans less than in many other animals, so that they can actually function and survive themselves. The female can survive themselves, but there's a great risk there. Females potentially can have a small number of children. I can't actually remember what the maximum number is for a woman having children, but it's pretty high. It's something like 66 or something crazy like that. But that's an extreme score, and in the life of a female, most females will potentially have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that kind of number. The difference is that females are always certain of maternity because they give birth to the child. They know that's their child. Males, on the other hand, there's a lower risk from sex. They, can impregnate, and if they want to, they can leave. They're not involved in pregnancy. They don't have to breastfeed and so on. They can potentially have thousands of children, although again, most men don't have that many more than most females, or have the same amount. But the cost for male is that the male is never certain of his paternity. Again, we're talking about in the days before paternity testing actually was available. A male was never certain whether the child was his or not. So what do humans look for in a mate? Well, given these different costs, which first of all was specified by Bateman, which is about the different costs of reproduction between the sexes. More recently, this has been framed by Robert Trivers in the early 70s as parental investment theory. And this is rather neutral, and we'll see some nice exceptions to this. Well, not exceptions to it, but nice exceptions to the standard way things happen later on. And basically, the summary of Trivers' parental investment theory is the sex that has the greater investment in the offspring is the choosier. Now, in humans, that will be females, because the greater investment is borne by the female. Investment in terms of pregnancy, investment in terms of nursing, and so on. So it should predict that female humans would be choosier than male humans. And this means that females should be usually more cautious about having sex because of the greater cost of sex for females than males. It should show that females are more cautious about males abandoning them by falling in love with someone else. It should suggest that males are more promiscuous, and it would suggest that males are more wary than females of their partners having sex with somebody else, because obviously males don't want to be rearing children that aren't their own, because males are never certain about paternity. So this picture on the right hand side here are TT monkeys, and the male and female kind of entwine their tails, and it looks ever so beautiful and cute. But actually what this is a thing called mate guarding. Once the male has had sex with the female clings onto the female until she gives birth to ensure that nobody else can impregnate her, leaving him to bring up somebody else's kids, which is something that happens quite a bit in the animal kingdom. So is this a universal truth? Is parental investment theory a universal truth? Is it a universal truth that females are always the higher investing sex? Well, no. There are a number of species out there, birds such as phalaropes and jacanas. Jacanas, this is the picture of a jacana at the top here. That's a lily trotter. The females are larger, more aggressive, and less choosy than the males. Now, this seems to be against Trivers' parental investment theory, because the females here are behaving much more like the males, and the males are behaving much more like traditional females would do in many other species. But it actually turns out that it actually is completely in line with parental investment theory, because males are the ones that hatch the eggs, and males are the ones that, once those eggs are hatched, do most of the childcare and do most of the foraging for food. So the investment of females there actually turns out is lower than the investment in males. Remember, birds don't give birth to live young. They give birth to, they produce eggs, so most of the incubation happens outside the body, and males fulfill that role. So here we have the males being the sex which are more heavily invested in the offspring. Therefore, it is the males that are choosier. So the males are the ones that are choosier in selecting females in jacanas and phalaropes, which is the opposite way around. So parental investment theory predicts this too. So the higher investing sex is the one that is the most choosy. We know from lots of research that women are more cautious about sex than men. Clark and Hatfield's classic study from the 1980s, which was replicated by Fisher and Cox in 2009, if you ask how acceptable it is to sleep with a person if you've known them for a particular period of time, then you always find that men find it more acceptable to have sex with a woman after all of the time periods than do women. So it's suggesting that females are choosier. And this doesn't mean that females want to have sex less or are less interested in sex. All it suggests is that females are more choosy about who they have sex with and how long it takes them to have sex to reach that point at which it's acceptable to have sex. That's not to say that there are some females who are less choosy than some males, but it's an average difference. So this increase in choosiness of females is to do with, according to Trivers, is to do with the greater risk, the greater cost of sex, the fact that they're the ones that are investing in it. And you don't want to make a bad choice. And we'll talk later about short versus long-term relationships. But certainly it's the case that the more likely somebody is to be boyfriend material or girlfriend material, the longer people are prepared to wait until they have sex. This is the will you go to bed with me. This is, again, Clark and Hatfield did this originally. This is where people were asked on university campuses of whether they'd like to A, go out, B, come to my apartment, or C, go to bed with me. And what you find out is on the males on the right are always more likely to do all of these things, and particularly go to bed, than the females. So go to bed is this kind of pale green one here. What we also notice is that for both sexes, the more attractive the person who's asking them is, the more likely they are to do all three things. It's more attractive here, and the same for females here. But you can see the differences between going out and having sex are much more different, much bigger for females than they are for males, suggesting that, you know, it's not just about there is something particular about sex, not rather than just going out with somebody. So this is a relatively recent replication of that from 2009. So females are choosier about having sex. The reason for not going out, men would say, I'm in a relationship, or going to bed, she's not that attractive, I don't know, she's not my type, it's awkward. Kind of similar for women, but this kind of notion of creepiness and being too forward and stalkerish are kind of more prominent for women, showing that for at least quite a lot of women, being very forward and saying, will you have sex with me, is really a bit of a turn-off. It's kind of seen as being a bit creepy and too forward. Whereas for men, although it's awkward and they may not want to do it, the reasons given, they don't find it as threatening. Sexual jealousy we saw that males are can never be certain of their paternity, whereas females may be more concerned with males leaving them. So this suggests that males should be more concerned about their partners having sex with somebody else, but females more concerned about their partners falling in love with somebody else, because that signifies commitment. And there's research which supports this. When you ask people to imagine what's the worst thing you can imagine, your partner having sex with somebody else, or your partner falling in love with somebody else, men find it worse to think of the first one, having sex, females, the second one. Now, I haven't quite expressed that properly, and there's a really good paper by which I'll link to in this folder, which actually really shows that these differences are really quite small. They're real differences, but they're maybe not as big differences as sometimes people make out. So females want men who are able to provide resources for them. So females should be interested in resources and status because of this extra cost of sex. They want men who are also not just able but willing. So they want them to be good fathers, they want them to be generous, they want them to be kind. Males also want women to be kind, but they want women who are able to have high quality offspring. So men are more likely to favour youthfulness, healthiness, and fertility. And they also want characteristics which are going to be indicative of good mothers. Again, these differences are relatively small, and the paper by Steve Stuart Williams that I mentioned earlier is a great source in which to critique some of this stuff. It's real, but not as big as people sometimes think. So, there's Donald Trump. Bus is classic finding from 1989 across 37 cultures with a number of participants of 10,047 shows that women place greater emphasis on status and wealth, whereas males place emphasis on sexual fidelity and physical attraction, kind of as predicted by those previous slides. But there are some cross-cultural differences, so more equal societies have smaller differences, such as, for example, the Scandinavian countries. And again, Steve Stuart Williams' paper nicely places these results in their proper context. He doesn't criticise them, but he does place them in a useful and interesting context. Men are more concerned with physical characteristics than women, which is indicative of the greater risk of sex for women than men, and indicative of also the fact that men tend to want women who are more interested in the healthiness of the woman than men are interested in the healthiness of the man. There are various signals of genetic quality, so the kind of famous hourglass figure that apparently men are supposed to prefer is indicative of underlying fertility, so women who have that look are more fertile. And again, women prefer cross-culturally the V-shaped body of a male, which again is indicative of strength and the ability to do various jobs. Again, we're talking here very physical, very traditional, and there are lots of similarities, and there are also many, many psychological characteristics that people value, probably even more than the physical characteristics, particularly when we're talking about long-term mating strategies. I'll finish off this bit and I will start to talk about short versus long-term strategies in the next screencast.